This is Gary Coleman's house in Santa Quinn, Utah. It's way up on the hill off the freeway. This is his backyard, obviously. I came here in 2010 and it looked exactly like this. It hasn't changed a bit. He had started this vinyl fencing here. He moved here in 2005 from Los Angeles. Basically, he was just trying to get the hell out of LA. I spoke to Scott Michaels about that from Fine to Death, and I asked him, I was like, why did Gary move here? And he said, man, after you've lived in LA for a while, stuff like this is very, very appealing, places like this. But he moved here in 2005. He was filming a movie called Church Ball, and in Provo, Utah, actually. And that's where he met his future wife, Shannon Price. She was a tall redhead. She was 22 years old. He was 39. They actually got married in Nevada, I believe in the Valley of the Fire State Park. And right after that, they moved in together here. I came here in 2010, like I said, and I got some really good close-up stuff of this house. Like, those black windows are actually one-way panes. And there was all kinds of stuff all over this yard. You could tell, like, Gary was like a do-it-yourself kind of guy. There was like little step ladders where he was changing light bulbs. There's security lights all over this building. There's a camera on the front door. There was just trash all over the yard. You could tell where he was just like, you know, just being a homeowner, kind of doing stuff like that. But he moved here in 2005, like I said, and they moved in together in 2007. I believe they got married on August 28th, 2007. Anyway, you know, and they had a long series of domestic abuse as they lived in this home. They were both busted and cited twice. One time they were in Provo and they were actually out on the street and they were fighting, and the cops totally cited both of them for disorderly conduct. They were screaming and yelling at each other, apparently. And then a little bit later, in 2006, he got in a fight with a photographer at a bowling alley, which I'll show you here in a few minutes. But anyway, this is the home where Gary Coleman actually collapsed. Supposedly he had a seizure and fell down the stairs. And this is the place where his wife did the famous 911 call, where she said she couldn't be bothered to help him because she was having way too much stress. And she was like yelling at him, telling him to sit down, Gary, sit down, because he was bleeding from his head profusely. And he ended up having a intracranial hemorrhage and was taken to Intermountain Healthcare Hospital in Provo at the time. And that's where he eventually died. But this was Gary Coleman's house that he shared with Shannon Price. They were divorced in 2008, but they, you know, just a year later, but they ended up staying together. She still kept living here. And that's the front door right there, 892. And if you were to look directly into that door, that's the staircase that he would have fell down. Anyway, this is Gary Coleman's house. Off the backside over here, he was building like a fountain. There's all kinds of stuff, but they haven't done a whole lot with this house. It looks like people are living there, but it is an enormous lot. But when I was here, there were like bags in the windows. Like, you know, I think they were living here at the very end of their means, money-wise. The house was worth about $325,000 afterwards, and that's basically that's all that he had to his name. That's it. His parents, you know, had famously fleeced him for all his riches that he had made all those years during different strokes. And so this was it. This was his house right here. That's all he had. This is the South County Lanes in Payson, Utah, which is just a little bit north of Santa Quinn, where Gary had holed up with his wife Shannon Price. In 2006, right about midnight, Gary was hanging out here. This place stays open. You know, these kind of places stay open because they have bars And in some of these smaller Utah towns, a lot of times the local bowling alley will be the only place that has a bar, period. Because, you know, it's really LDS Mormon type communities. Anyway, he was here in 2006 around midnight, and there had been a guy who was kind of stalking him around the bowling alley inside, and he actually was pestering Gary all night long for a photograph, and Gary kept telling him, you know, get lost, man. I'm not into it. And, you know, just his entourage. He was here with Shannon and a few other people. And the guy apparently waited for Gary out here in the parking lot that night. And now Gary drove an enormous truck, like a big, huge, full-sized pickup truck with a lift kit on it. I've seen pictures of it. And that was really kind of something to see, him standing next to it. But anyway, Gary was parked in the parking lot out here. And the guy came up apparently and just banged on his window as he was getting ready to leave, just pestering him for a photograph with his cell phone. And Gary said, you know, something to the effects of F off, I'm leaving. And he started backing up, and apparently the guy was right behind him. He backed up quickly, and he actually caught the guy. I've read some things that said that he actually ran over part of the guy, and then I've heard others that he just knocked him down. Anyway, so he was not arrested. The police showed up, and apparently he was only fined $100, and he was given a disorderly conduct citation. Again, his third one that he had when he lived here in Utah. But yeah, this is the parking lot. This is where it happened. Famously ran over a guy who was just trying to get his picture. As you do. Gary Coleman's attorney, actually here in Provo, Utah, this is his building. His name is Randy Kester. This is where Gary would have came here and spoke with Randy about, you know, some of the domestic abuse stuff. And you know, Gary actually spent time in jail in Spanish Fork at the jail there, but Randy would have helped him out from that point of view. This was his office. This was his attorney. This was his office at the time, and it still is. And he was also, you know, very closely involved as an executor of his house and his estate at the very end. Randy Kester. All right, so this is Intermountain Utah Valley Regional Medical Center. This is the hospital that Gary Coleman was actually taken to when he fell down the stairs on May 26th in 2010, excuse me. Very busy street, hopefully it's not too noisy, but he was brought here after that famous 911 call where his ex-wife, who was living with him, famously was like, "Oh my God, Gary, just sit down," kind of yelling at him. "Your head is bleeding," and telling the operator that she couldn't help him because it was way too stressful. Holy cow, remind me never to fall down the stairs around someone like that. But anyway, this is the front entrance of it. He was actually taken around on the back entrance to the emergency room at that point. All right, so this is the backside of Intermountain Healthcare, the hospital where Gary Coleman was taken, emergency trauma center, on May 26th after he fell down the stairs famously after having a, supposedly, more than likely having a seizure. You know, there was a lot of tabloid stuff where, you know, people kind of blame Shannon, like she pushed him or something like that, because they did have a history of domestic violence. And there's a famous picture of Shannon and Gary, and she's kind of, it's almost like a selfie. She's laying next to him in the bed, and you can kind of see the camera up above him, and he's got tubes in his nose, and he's clearly unconscious. But in reality, Shannon probably took that picture herself or had it taken, and she sold that picture more than likely, I mean, there's no proof of this, to the National Enquirer herself. She probably she made good money off that picture. You know, there's very little doubt of that. But Anyway, he was taken here on May 26th, and he was considered lucid and in and out of consciousness. Apparently he was awake. He was but just kind of drifting in and out. On the 27th, the very next day, they put him on life support, and he was unconscious, you know, at that point. And then on May 28th, Shannon, as kind of taking some control, she actually was able to have his life support pulled, and she had it pulled, and he died around noon on May 28th. He just slipped away. But this is where he would have came that day on the 26th. This is where he would have entered the building. May 28th, Gary Coleman dies in Provo at the hospital, and this is actually Sandy, Utah. It's north of Provo by about 30 miles, and his body was actually interred here for a matter of about a week before it was finally cremated here. This is where Gary Coleman actually was cremated. Now, the thing about this situation with Gary is that nobody really knows, you know, how, you know, where he's buried, what happened to him, how long it took for him to be buried. I mean, there's absolutely no information out there. It's called Lake Hills Memorial in Sandy. He was supposedly, according to some, he was not buried for over a year. But I know that Shannon Price was trying really hard to become the executor, or the final owner of his house, I should say, because that's really his only possession that he had. And she, according to her, she wanted to be the one that had access to his body, and she was going to sprinkle his ashes out in Utah Lake. But there's no telling whether or not that ever happened. But anyway, this is where Gary was cremated, here in Sandy, Utah. And if anybody has some information about what happened to Gary, I'd love to hear it. You know, nobody really knows. There's nothing out there. But there you have it.